Hello and welcome to the Toronto Daily News for Thursday, January 10th. So today I'm going to do I organized it badly, but I'm going to do 4 different segments of news, and within those 4, it's the order is just there's no particular order, which sucks. And I'm going to do 4 promos for stuff that I'm like advertising products that I'm not getting paid for. I'm just demonstrating like how I want to do ads, and I'm also sort of trying to figure out whether I want to do it, see how I feel about it. Anyway, so the province might upload the subway. Apparently, part of the point of doing this is so that the province can have a different way of getting developers to build subway stations by giving them the rights to the space above the stations. So this is their new scheme. I don't know if there maybe some kind of reason why the city couldn't do this, but the province can, or something like that. Anyway, this is happening really quick. Activists showed up at City Hall to voice their concerns about this upload and a potential fare increase that's been announced. The GO train situation, in Canada, our interstitial train situation, like trains between cities, is so ghetto. And in Ontario, we definitely experience this. I don't know if we have the most developed system, but it's always maintained in really terrible shape. So the GO train, the Brampton mayor has actually been speaking with the press because the GO train situation in the last several days has just been so congested. The GO is not managing their supply and demand situation. CTV interviewed one rider who explained it pretty well. He said they nixed the 450 line. Everybody from the 450 had to, or the express, right? So they all had to use the 502 instead, which was already full. The Brampton mayor was saying it's already full when it comes into Brampton. So this CTV went and got some pretty good video and did a bunch of interviews about this, and it's bad. And so they're talking about adding a car to this train. They say that would decongest it by 500 people or something, 300 or 500 people, I guess, per rush hour or something. I don't know. Reddit users, this one Reddit user just started, out of the blue, complaining about that their commute is the most terrible part of their day, and a whole bunch of other users piled on about this. A whole bunch of transit users, and then drivers started chiming in, just saying you think the TTC is bad, driving is just ridiculous. The only positive experiences were being reported by cyclists, saying that their commute was the best time of their day. And that was actually my response too. I commute by bike, and it's not, it has its terribleness as well, but the everything about cycling that's crappy is so different from everything about this other stuff that's crappy. We just don't face the congestion situation. We face different challenges. So when everybody else is having a terrible commute, we're doing great, and when everyone else is fine, sometimes we're doing terrible. So there's an interesting conversation about that on Reddit. And the downtown financial district bike lanes they're the most successful ones in Toronto. Talking about the Richmond, Adelaide, Simcoe, and Peter lanes. And so on January 3rd, the general manager for transportation services made this report to the Infrastructure and Environmental Committee. Now, this is what used to be Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. And it's kind of funky because in the reshuffling at City Hall, the word Public Works has been taken out of everything. There's no more Public Works thing in whatever. And they've rebranded PWIC as the Infrastructure and Environment Committee. So on January 17th, they are going to consider this report from the general manager. So the Infra Environmental Committee is like, and PWIC, which precedes it, it's one of the committees that's made up of city councilors, and they do, infrastructure, public works stuff. So when there's bike lanes going on, that falls within their purview in ways that a lot of driving infrastructure doesn't, a lot of transit infrastructure doesn't. So with when there's cycling stuff going on, it gets discussed in city council and thrown back and forth between city council and this other committee. So on the 17th, they will review this report and we'll see what happens with that. But these lanes have been so successful and have no real history of causing like congestion and delays. So it's pretty much a shoo-in that they will be made permanent. They might be switching one of them to the other side of the road from where it is now and changing some little bits and pieces of parking and stuff, but they don't have that much recommendations in terms of changing them. This is an interesting one. So Post City did this little report on it's like this Toronto blog site, Post City. When like laneways and alleyways get kind of adopted by their community and turned into streets and whatever, which is this laneway kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, a laneway development situation is happening all over Toronto. People are using, people are repurposing garages as little apartments or whatever, or I mean, either way, a lot of properties have, 2 units in one house and 2 entrances, one at the front and one at the back, and then they've got their garage at the back as well. So the alleyways have been for a long time this other set of streets, which are kind of insular, for that one block of neighbors. But as soon as you add a name to them, Google Maps and the internet in general becomes aware of them, and then they start telling commuters to go through them. And I've experienced this as a cyclist, as a driver. People, drivers have this as well, where they get Google Maps suddenly kind of like directing them through these weird back alleys that they didn't know about, where they can kind of do 30 kph, but when they're being transformed like this, residents don't want that. They want slow moving traffic. They want places where kids can play really easily and stuff. And so it brings up an interesting design question. How do you maintain throughput for these type of back alleys so that residents can easily get their vehicles in and out and through, and then also allow Google Maps to understand these back alleys, because of course they should. People should be able to know about them and route through them and whatever, but not at high speed. How do you solve the speed problem? So this one resident told Post City it's about designing for low design speeds, so like narrow areas and lots of art and visual stuff and whatever. And so it makes me wonder, what technical things could Google Maps do as well to kind of recognize that these are really low speed areas, and then you factor that in when it's figuring out routes for people. There's going to be a big subway closure for January 12th and 13th. Line 1 is going to be closed between St. Clair and Union. There's this one news report about so Global in their evening news, they did this whole story about auto dealerships along Eglinton suffering due to, suffering loss of business due to LRT construction. How ironic is that? I mean, you're building a LRT that is going to give people, an option that competes with their current driving commute. So it's going to reduce the number of vehicles. It's going to take a bite out of the auto industry one way or the other. And then it's kind of attacking it during construction. So Global was interested in telling that story. They called it the Golden Mile. I haven't really heard this term before, so I'm kind of curious about like Eglinton as Canada's big, auto golden mile. That's really interesting. Okay, so there's like a big cold snap that just settled in overnight. This was the first and really a dramatic version of our cold snaps that we can have, where things were relatively warm for a few days, and then boom, over a period of hours, while a lot of people were just at work or out doing whatever, the temperature just plummeted, leading to a really, for some people, unexpectedly chilly evening commute, and a lot of concern about Toronto's, homeless and vulnerable people and stuff like that, being exposed kind of unexpectedly, and maybe not knowing about it. So hopefully we won't be hearing, stories about homeless people who froze to death, on Thursday night, Friday morning. But this is, I guess, the first day where we might expect to see some of that. So Toronto's weed lottery, they've started it up, and they're going to give 25 lucky applicants. Maybe not the most qualified. They'll have a minimum kind of level of whatever qualification, but they're not going to it's not going to be competitive. They're not going to award the 25 most worthy applicants or something like that. It's a lottery, but they kind of extended the hours for the lottery submissions because everybody came in at the last second with it. So it's this Toronto marijuana in stores situation has really gotten off to a messy start. CTV did this interesting consumer report about repair versus replacement, and kind of how repair is dead, and they found a really good example of it. They spoke with a woman who she was facing repair costs of $1,200 for this washer. It's the typical story of oh, it's more expensive to repair, but her little bit of research suggested it's okay, it's a $25 part and it's pretty easy to install. And then of course, through the magic of the only repair people that she could call, they don't do service that they can't guarantee, and they can't guarantee service using this part that's not blah blah blah, and if they use the right part, then they have to charge crazy amounts of money. And so it's this whole complicated scenario, and this is a really common experience for a lot of people. I was my experience is spending $500 on bits and pieces of parts for my Toyota when I used to be a driver, and then one of the tow truck guys that had to tow me managed to fix my problem by screwing in, tightening up a screw inside the engine compartment. It was just a loose wire, that type of thing, where every authorized dealership I could take it to was scamming me. So that was kind of a it's not super often that that the press talks about this problem. But it's neat. It's neat to see. They laid it out pretty nicely. So this Montreal photographer, this has been like pretty cringeworthy. He's doing this like homeless Facebook project where he's like, okay, well, homeless people, like, they don't have social network and they don't have phones and stuff, and like, okay, that's complicated, and like, not, you know, that's a half truth, and like, but so he's like, so I'm photographing them like on the regular in these like stations, and then putting this collection together and giving them the photos as well and stuff, and that does have its social usefulness too. So it's a bit of a that's like a hard story to tell about you know, social problems, about poverty and homelessness, because it's you know, it's kind of condescending to be like, oh, you guys don't have social networking, so I'll do this physical thing. But at the same time, it's useful and nice. My reaction to it is sort of a good idea talked about and delivered the wrong way. I don't know. In a problematic way. I don't know. In an out of touch way. In a tone deaf way. I don't know. And let's see. So this Toronto designer, CBC Here and Now yesterday on CBC Radio, they're interviewing this Toronto designer about like having her copyright logo. It's like what was it, a logo, or it was a t-shirt design, and it was kind of like a meme that you know, she claims is like an original you know, piece of work by her. Indigo picked it up. What surprised me about this story is, if you don't know how much it costs to copyright like a piece of art so that you can make money off selling it and nobody else can, and nobody else can, like, you know, steal it, whatever. She spent $15,000 on this one piece. That blows me away. I had no idea it was that expensive to keep other people from making money off of your work per piece. So whether you're a big company or a small, you know, small business, or as an individual. So she's this individual who's like spent 15 grand copywriting this thing, and now she's having problems, even though she copyrighted it, getting Indigo to stop stealing her copyright. So if you're curious about, like, check out the two designs and see if you think Indigo is plagiarizing her and just assuming that they're going to get away with it, because they totally could. So CBC Radio and the press in general has been doing a little bit of cleanup work on their coverage of the Unistoten camp situation in BC. They've been reporting this camp as just this little protest camp that has been blocking access for several days. They keep saying several days. Instead of several years, because it's been several years, and they keep saying several days and kind of sanitizing out the whole history of the Unistoten camp. The thing that's been blocking access for several days is this additional sympathetic checkpoint or blockade or whatever that was set up after police got all threatening. So that was a reflexive, responsive type of thing. So technically they can get away with saying they've been blocking it for a few days, but it's misleading because this spot has been inaccessible to, you know, industry for a few years because of these people who've been blocking that. So that's an interesting choice on their part. At the same time, yesterday's coverage, so on Wednesday, they found a pipeline supporter from one of these indigenous communities who had said yes to the project, the LNG project. And he was just, he said super mean, insensitive things about activists and stuff, saying they're out of touch with the social problems facing indigenous people that only pipelines can solve. And then on Thursday, they interviewed a supporter, and they mentioned the Toronto protest that occurred on the Bloor Viaduct. So it's like, depending on which CBC program it is, they don't want to talk about the protest that's happening right now, or they will mention it. So, and depending on what, and yeah, on Wednesday, the interview was just ridiculous, and then Thursday, the interview makes total sense. And yeah, I'm opposed to the pipeline personally. So of course it's going to make more sense to me. But the other thing is, objectively speaking, everything that the MLA said on Wednesday was just ridiculous. And everything that the supporter said on Thursday made sense, logical sense. So that was an interesting turnaround. That was in their evening Here and Now episode. Okay. They also reported in Old Crow in, I think, the Yukon. People are scared because the wolves are getting really hungry and prowling through the town. They're coming into town. They're really hungry. So, what else? So back to Toronto. A Reddit user captured and posted the screaming sounds made by some of the balconies at the new condo at Yonge and Eglinton. So some of the we've had problems with glass falling off the side of these new condos onto the sidewalks below. This condo it's super massive, and there's something about the design of it that is making this whirring kind of sound. One of the other Reddit users described it as the same sound as being inside of a server farm, where you're surrounded by like thousands of computers. The video is pretty haunting. This sound is pretty creepy. And to bring you that creepy news, the bad news report, this is the worst coffee I've ever tasted. It's fruity in a very disturbing way. I just can't believe how terrible it is. It's just brutal how bad it is. How bad it is. And don't judge, but I did get dollar store noodles. This is Bowlful brand. This is the worst noodles ever. It's not food. I can't finish it. I can't finish the soup. I'm done. I'm totally screwed on soup. So our downtown could end up sounding really, really, really creepy and having falling glass here and there. I guess that's a bit wild. So the Ontario Human Rights Commission has released this report about racial profiling and discrimination in the Toronto police force, and it's pretty damning. Like they're like, okay, the profiling that you guys are doing isn't effective. There's no efficacy borne out by the numbers, and it's just they link it with a totally out of control, excessive use of force situation with Toronto's Black community. So like, specifically, y'all are beating up Black people using because of using racial profiling because of discrimination. Then the police department admitted that discrimination is actually a problem in their ranks. Amazing. A guy got arrested for doing about 180 kilometers an hour while drunk on the highway. 2 young kids in the car. See if he faces any charges. So there's a memorial for the woman who died recently, and the donation, who had a crawled into a donation bin here in Toronto and died. It was kind of an activist affair. It was, half memorial and half demo. Activists are promoting a housing first approach to homelessness, calling on the city to declare a state of emergency, open the armories and stuff like that. Basically a repeat of all the same stuff we saw last year. Hopefully we can achieve a lower death toll this year and lower injury cost and everything. On the lighter side, bringing you the lighter side news, I've got the Selection spring water doesn't have fluoride. Recent report indicated drinking fluoridated stuff is not an effective fluoride treatment. It has bad side effects that you don't want, and we should stop fluoridating. Toronto should stop fluoridating. It's one of the last remaining holdouts. The trend is for municipalities to stop. Some people can't handle fluoride even in small quantities. I'm one of them. This is my whole situation. I got a third world water situation, but thankfully Selection has my back. And the good news is we might get a Netflix production hub. So there's jobs that are in industries other than building cars and oil. And we might get a whole bunch of more, entertainment production jobs. If Netflix brings a hub here, we might not get a bunch of tax money out of it. But they have announced like $500 million in investment over the next 5 years into Canadian productions. This is kind of a sketchy story because they can show up here, give Canadians jobs. We'll be happy about the jobs. Tory is like, we'll do whatever you want. But they might be able to get away with just not doing a lot of the stuff that other Canadian production companies are required to do to operate in Canada or operate in Ontario and stuff like that. So that is honestly just slightly sketchy. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of violence in the GTA. On Wednesday night at Elmhurst and Islington, somebody was shot by some people in an SUV. They shot at him 6 times. The guy, he died in the hospital. And on the scene was somebody noticed him there, and so he's dead. Ajax police, over the last 24 hours, they had 2 shootings. And so they've said they're gonna just increase their presence. They're unaware of the motive in the first one. This guy was shot while crossing Kingston Road on his way to this Tim Hortons, goes into the Tim Hortons bleeding. 4 suspects, 3 men and 1 woman, fled in a dark van or SUV. The guy, the victim is 17. And then on Wednesday night, they had another shooting in the area. It's a big collision on Thursday morning. 2 pickup trucks were involved, 3 people injured. This is at Eglinton at Swift near Bermondsey. Apparently it was a rollover collision. And police are updating us on a robbery from January 5th. They, on the next day, so they caught some of the suspects, put him in court on the next day, and now they have information about additional suspects. One of them actually had fake money, so like weapons and stuff, drugs, whatever, and counterfeit currency. One of the people they found. They want to find 4 additional men, and there's info and photos of them and stuff. So this was a robbery that happened Dundas East in Victoria. So I guess if you were there on January 5th and you saw anything weird, check out the photos. So this teen was shot in Etobicoke while on his on this bus trip to visit his friend's place, and apparently he was followed by somebody in a vehicle, or followed on foot through the TTC, or to followed to this place where he's going to transfer from one bus to the other. And this seems to be this kind of theme of a lot of these killings, is someone gets shot by somebody else who's following them, who's stalking them, either in a car or on foot or something like that. I don't know if this is typical or if I'm just noticing this because I'm reading the news for the second week in a row, but people getting stalked and killed. There's 16 boys arrested from this Milton High School. I don't know if they go to the high school, but probably from the sounds of things, that's these 16 boys had 2 weapons. One of them a real gun, one of them a replica. But there's one group seen chasing another group of students, shooting at them, or just chasing them with the real guns and the fake gun. I don't know. So the Global News, when it interviewed the students about it, they said the cops showed up with automatic rifles and everything like that, and did this whole special ops thing at the school. A crash around noon at the 407 in Jane has 3 people injured. Somebody actually getting, talking with some police in their police cruiser parked on the shoulder. Somebody else smashed into the cop car. And police are concerned about the disappearance of Sadaf Rasoli and her 2 boys, 9-year-old Arman and 3-year-old Emin. She's got she named her boys Arman and Emin. That is so cute. So hopefully they're okay. They were last seen at Queen and Parliament on Christmas Eve. So that's some missing persons. Sadaf Rasoli is 29. The Ford government released this sketchy legislation 66, Bill 66, and there's a whole bunch of concerning factors. So you probably heard some kind of concerning thing coming out of Bill 66. But one of the implications is it might allow municipalities to open up bits of the Greenbelt for development, for commercial development. So the premier is okay, don't worry, we're not going to reduce the green space. Anything we'll swap. We'll make green space elsewhere if we take it away from here. That's his reassurance. Sketchy. So have you ever had to just say, that's what you say? Sometimes that's it's just what you say when you got to leave, and it's not under super awesome circumstances, and you got to quit your job, and it's because you don't really want to do your job while you're also being part of some trial where you might have to be a witness at the trial and stuff. And it's just this kind of bad PR situation. You can't really say that, when you resign. So you got to say, well, like, I just want to spend more time with family. I know it's a bad time to resign, but it's, I suddenly unexpectedly need to suddenly start spending more time with my family. So Scott Bryson is resigning from the from federal cabinet. So Justin Trudeau has to shuffle the cabinet around, and he's called a by-election. So he's like, okay, I got 10 months after to shuffle this cabinet around and then turn my situation around with Canadians who either, hate me for not building pipelines or hate me for building the pipelines that I do support, or where is my support coming from? So the talking heads are all kind of talking about will the federal Liberals, manage to pull this one out of their hat? Do they have it in them? But he's just saying that because that's what you have to say. He's got to spend more time with his family. So the new Maduro government in Venezuela has been declared by Chrystia Freeland, our foreign affairs minister, as being bogus, and it is. But Canada is officially calling them out for Maduro being illegitimate. The situation in Venezuela is really garbage. Largely because of Maduro. So China, for a long time, has been importing the world's garbage and just dumping it because a lot of it it's recyclable, but it's not worth it to recycle it. So they've just been dealing with it. And they have said, we're not going to do this anymore. And so now Canadian companies are bracing to actually reduce the amount of plastics that they use. CBC caught on to this story, and on the National did a pretty nice expose of just things being overpackaged in stores and stuff like that. You got to check this out. My favorite part of it is the journalist is like, okay, you got ground beef in a plastic thing, in another plastic thing, in another plastic bag, in another plastic bag. And the kid's like, yeah. That's interesting. China's like, no, we're on the dark side of the moon right now. We don't need to take your garbage anymore. It's also an interesting timing given their weird, political prisoners situation that's going on right now. So U.S. government workers have finally started doing protests and demonstrations and stuff across the states after being just not paid and furloughed for, I forget how long it's going on. What are we in, week 3? They're turning to activism. The UK is finally starting to outfit its airports with military-grade anti-drone tech. And about that plastic situation, in the National, they actually went up and found a whole bunch of stuff from Ontario and Toronto places. So they're in China in this big garbage dump of imported recyclables that are not going to be recycled, and it's food basics and stuff like that. This news brought to you by Zippo, because when you get a Zippo lighter, this replaces a huge mountain of all the other lighters that I would have bought. Brought to you by Zippo, who is not paying me because I'm still not sure how I feel about doing promos. And it doesn't matter yet because I have no viewers, which is great. I have 6, I think yesterday. 6. That scares me. Who knows? Who knows what could happen with my broadcast? Lady Gaga is apologizing for working with R. Kelly in the past after it's come out that like there's this new documentary exposing how terribly creepy and abusive he is and stuff like that. She says it was like during this dark time in her life that she worked with him. How much would it hurt to have Lady Gaga say that about you? I mean, that's the beginning of his punishment. I think that's probably this is having the documentary looming and coming out. Maybe that's the first real punishment he's faced. Having Lady Gaga say this, I regret having worked with you. Nice. So as it happens, opened their evening program with news about some developments for thalidomide survivors. So thalidomide is this medication that caused a whole bunch of birth defects for lots and lots of people. They might benefit from like expanded supports, or they might expand the criteria loosen the criteria for people to receive compensation for being thalidomide survivors. And Canada, in its very classic Canadian way, has been doing this in a very sketchy way, requiring people to have, receipts that they would have had to just randomly store for decades, and records that go back like really far through people moving and everything like that. So for anybody who had a loss of medical records, or who had a loss of financial documents, or who never kept their receipts or something like that, all those people fell through the cracks. And thalidomide exposure caused really debilitating ailments and stuff like that. So these people have been they're a really good example of people who have been 100% screwed by Health Canada. And this one story that, as it happens, they interviewed this one guy who he had so many medical records fires. So he lost. This guy just described like, so we had this records fire, and I lost that, and then we had this other records fire, I lost that, and all the fires are documented. Like he's not lying. He can document all the fires that destroyed his records over and over and over again, and that piqued my interest because I'm like, okay, well, I had my records lost in a fire after having surgical mesh installed in my body as an implant. The surgical mesh has started causing problems, and it's known to, like, Health Canada is known to do a terrible job of controlling the quality of products like surgical mesh, because you can introduce sketchy products in and skirt testing and stuff by connecting them with some previous product that has been out there. So there's all these sketchy mesh products that are wrecking people's bodies that are just like the ones in my body. And I had this weird records fire in BC. After hearing this brings me to a really good conspiracy theory. What if Health Canada is orchestrating, or somebody is orchestrating, the deliberate destruction of records that would be costly or embarrassing to Canadian or like provincial health authorities? They would never do that, right? Well, Health Canada has they have a reputation and have gotten busted a whole bunch in the last several years for not managing our prescriptions properly. So we don't make our own prescriptions here in Canada, not all of them. And so we order a bunch from India and places like that. There's no place like India, but from foreign countries. And so we rely on the Americans and their inspections and stuff like that, and what their inspections say. But when they inspect some facility and say, this place is dirty, that we're not ordering from them anymore, that's a sketchy facility, we keep ordering from them. Health Canada is getting in trouble for ordering terrible medication from terrible manufacturers. So they're terrible at managing our quality control situation. Are they also conspiring to remove the evidence? For the news for Wednesday, January 10th, this is your host, Dorian Sky. See you on Saturday morning.